On this Monday night, the Russian president's promise for punishment. Vladimir Putin's message for the leaders of that short-lived Russian rebellion.
Any attempt to create internal turmoil is doomed to failure.
As Wagner's Yevgeny Prigozhin breaks his silence. Wildfire smoke chokes Ontario and Quebec.
It's definitely harder to breathe.
The health concerns and when Mother Nature will help clear the air. Plus, playing chicken.
Wow, great flavor. The texture's really nice.
The potential ripple effects of growing meat in a petri dish.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The Russian president is breaking his silence after Saturday's short-lived rebellion by the mercenary Wagner group. In a late-night TV address, a visibly angry Vladimir Putin says the leaders will face justice.
Дорогие друзья,
the insurrectionists betrayed their country and their own people, and they also dragged others into their criminal schemes, lying to them, pushing Russian soldiers to kill each other. This is the outcome that Russia's enemies want.
Putin's speech appeared to drive a wedge between Wagner's leaders and its soldiers, thousands of whom have played a critical role in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Putin says those soldiers who took part and later stood down will not be prosecuted, and he also thanked ordinary Russians for their unity. Well, just hours earlier, the leader of the Wagner group also spoke out, insisting it was never his intention to overthrow the Kremlin. These latest contradicting statements are raising new questions about what happened and what's next for Putin and his war in Ukraine. Redmond Shannon has our top story tonight.
Vladimir Putin's address to the nation was short, pre-recorded, and provided little in the way of inspiring rhetoric, but he did clarify one question. The embattled Russian president said the leadership of Saturday's short-lived mutiny will be brought to justice. The rebellion temporarily captured the city of Rostov-on-Don and advanced to within a few hours of Moscow. By leadership, he meant, of course, Wagner mercenary group boss Yevgeny Prigozhin, who he again refused to mention by name. Putin also assured the ordinary Wagner soldiers who stood down later on Saturday that they will not face punishment. Just like Putin, Prigozhin waited until Monday to address the remarkable events of Saturday, a day that ended with supportive crowds cheering him as he left Rostov-on-Don. In Prigozhin's 11-minute memo from an unknown location, he claimed the rebellion did not aim to depose Putin, only to hold the defense minister and head of the armed forces to account. Prigozhin said he stopped short of storming Moscow to prevent blood being spilled.
Even though this rebellion was quashed bloodlessly, it totally encourages anybody else who wants to have a go at Putin. And Russia is the most dog-eat-dog place.
U.S. investor Bill Browder has campaigned for a decade for more sanctions against the Putin regime.
Even more damning, I would say, for Putin's reputation, not to take this Prigozhin, take him to the middle of Red Square, set up a guillotine and chop his head off on public television.
Putin thanked Belarusian president and ally Alexander Lukashenko for brokering Saturday's deal, an agreement which said Prigozhin would move to Belarus. If Prigozhin is there, his safety is far from assured. Putin is believed to have signed off on targeted killings in far less friendly locations, and for reasons far less serious. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
In that speech, Putin also suggested the West was likely behind that failed Russian rebellion. But U.S. President Joe Biden says the U.S. was not involved, and he's been in contact with America's allies to coordinate a response.
We had to make sure we gave Putin no excuse. Let me emphasize, we gave Putin no excuse to blame this on the West or to blame this on NATO. We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it. This was part of a struggle within the Russian system.
The turmoil is also overshadowing a summit of Nordic nations in Iceland. Justin Trudeau is the first Prime Minister to attend the meeting, meant to boost cooperation among Arctic partners. But the chaos in Moscow dominated the agenda. Touria Izri is traveling with the Prime Minister in Reykjavik. Touria.
Jeff, the Nordic leaders plan to focus mostly on increasing cooperation in the Arctic and fighting climate change. But their agenda took a detour.
Okay.
Leaders of Nordic nations gathered for the final day of talks. But their discussions revolved around someone who was not in the room, Russian President Vladimir Putin. Iceland invited Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as a special guest.
This is obviously a very challenging internal situation in Russia. This is the head of a significant military, paramilitary organization in the Wagner group, taking some bold actions, challenging the regime.
We discussed the events of last Saturday in Russia, which show us really how unpredictable the situation can become.
For Nordic countries that neighbor Russia, the risk is even more real.
We have to be ready, and I'm happy that we are well prepared at this moment. The West is well prepared, NATO is well prepared, but we have to be ready.
Finland recently joined NATO. The organization's Secretary General called the short-lived rebellion in Russia another sign Putin's war in Ukraine was a mistake.
The weakness of the Russian regime, and it also demonstrates how difficult and dangerous it is for President Putin to be reliant on mercenaries.
Sweden is pushing to become a NATO member ahead of next month's summit in Lithuania.
And we need to make sure that we get you in by Vilnius in a couple of weeks.
Trudeau met with his Swedish counterpart on the sidelines.
You were actually the first country ratifying Sweden.
But Turkey is standing in the way. The Turkish president is blocking its entry into the alliance, accusing Sweden of harboring terrorists. The Turks and Swedes will have a sit-down in Brussels before the NATO summit. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he will continue to support Sweden's bid for membership as Western leaders try to respond to an increasingly unpredictable Russia. Jeff?
Touria Izri in Reykjavik, Iceland. Thanks, Touria. Toronto voters cast their ballots today to decide the next mayor of Canada's largest city. More than 100 candidates were in the running for this by-election, and if opinion polls are right, Olivia Chow could triumph tonight. The former NDP MP was the perceived front-runner throughout the campaign, but her lead in the polls narrowed over the final week after a surge in support for Anna Bailão. Bailão received a last-minute endorsement from John Tory, who resigned earlier this year after he admitted to an affair with a staffer. Well, it was another day of smoggy skies in parts of Quebec and Ontario. Drifting smoke from fires burning in northern Quebec lingered, keeping air quality advisories in place for much of the day. More than 450 fires are burning across the country, and roughly a quarter of those are in Quebec. It's already the worst fire season on record for that province. Mackenzie Gray reports on the impact of the smoke and how long it's expected to last.
One of Canada's most recognizable skylines stuck in a haze as smoke from forest fires in northern Quebec continues to blanket Montreal.
I think this is about it. Half an hour outside and we're going to go in.
For the second day in a row, outdoor activities closed or canceled, with the Air Quality Health Index listed as high risk. But that didn't stop some Montrealers from getting their exercise in.
It's definitely harder to breathe, I must say. I feel like you gotta pace yourself more.
Montreal Public Health saying today's poor weather won't have long-term health impacts.
I think people don't need to be overly worried about long-term impacts of, for example, a couple of days that we've had up till now. But in general, we know that reducing exposure to fine particles at any time and for any duration is a good idea.
Canadians are used to a bit of hot air coming out of Ottawa, but today the Peace Tower was shrouded in smoke. And despite the eerie look, it was actually an improvement from Sunday.
We'll see winds from the south, and it'll push that smoke back towards the fires, towards the northern parts of Quebec.
But that reprieve might be short-lived. Environment Canada modeling shows an even heavier band of smoke settling in over the next 72 hours, covering parts of Ontario, Quebec, and even some northern U.S. states. And it's not just Americans feeling the fires. Some 4,000 kilometers away, the sun went orange on the Portuguese island of the Azores. And satellite images shows the smoke even made it to mainland Europe. hitting the tip of Portugal.
The area burned in Canada is about the size of the province of New Brunswick. I mean, my gosh, that is a huge piece of geography that we burned this year.
There is one positive. There's lots of rain in the forecast. A major thunderstorm actually just rolled through here in Ottawa, and it's on its way to Montreal, Jeff, which will help clear some of the smoke from the air.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mac. Wow, at least one person was killed and another injured after tornadoes tore across Indiana on Sunday. Homes were ripped apart and hundreds of thousands lost power. Some areas reported hail up to 10 centimeters in diameter. Well, in Texas, a dangerous and deadly heat wave is now entering its third week. Temperatures in some places are expected to hit nearly 50 degrees Celsius in the coming days. The U.S. Coast Guard is scouring the site of the wreck of that Titan submersible, salvaging what it can from the ocean floor. 5 men were killed when that vessel imploded on a dive to the wreck of the Titanic. There are now multiple investigations to determine what went wrong. And as Mike Armstrong explains, multiple families are now grieving their loss.
Just a week after losing 5 people at sea, the Polar Prince is preparing to head out again. It was the mothership that launched the Titan submersible. It stayed on scene as part of the search and returned to port Saturday. Its next trip is with a different organization. Well, new details are now emerging about its last trip.
Yes, I was on board the vessel. I was on the ship.
In an interview with the BBC, Christine Dawood confirms she and her daughter were on the Polar Prince when her son and husband were lost. Dawood says she was supposed to be on the Titan when it dove to the wreck of the Titanic. She instead gave the spot to her son, Suleiman. He was excited. Dawood was on a lower deck on the Polar Prince having a snack when she was told the ship had lost communications with the sub.
I think I didn't comprehend at that moment what that meant. And then it just went downhill from there.
Dawood says during the search, she stayed hopeful, but knew time was running out. It was after 96 hours, when the sub would have run out of oxygen, that things changed.
That's when I lost hope. And that's when I even then sent a message to my family on shore. I said, I'm preparing for the worst.
A funeral prayer was held at the St. John's Mosque Sunday. Dawood says they remembered all 5 of the men who were lost. Now, the salvage operation at the site of the wreck continues. A remotely operated vehicle has made several dives.
The loss of a submarine crew or a submersible crew is very close to home for me.
Carl Hartsfield is a former U.S. sub-commodore. He was embedded with the Coast Guard last week during the search operation. Hartsfield says ROVs can recover debris of almost any size, but it is complicated, he says, and delicate.
Imagine if you were on top of the Empire State Building and you had a tennis ball on a string and you were trying to put it over a manhole cover.
Now, the world is used to seeing images of the wreck of the Titanic, not of the Titan. The U.S. Coast Guard says it will not release images or even a list of what it finds. But those items will be important to all 3 investigations now underway. The U.S. Coast Guard, the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, and the RCMP are all looking at the Titan tragedy. There's no timeline on how long it'll take for those investigations to be completed. The TSB said this weekend it could be 18 to 24 months. The U.S. Coast Guard said simply it will take as long as it takes. Jeff?
Mike Armstrong in St. John's. Thanks, Mike. Making a splash. Coming up, one kayaker's close encounter with a curious whale. The shooter who opened fire inside an LGBTQ2+ nightclub in Colorado last year was sentenced today. Anderson Lee Aldrich pleaded guilty to 5 counts of murder and 46 counts of attempted murder. That's 1 for each person inside Club Q. As part of the plea deal, the 23-year-old also pleaded no contest to 2 hate crimes. Aldrich received 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. A cybersecurity incident is causing disruptions at some Petro-Canada gas stations across the country. Numerous locations are now only able to process cash transactions, and Petro-Canada's app and loyalty program are also unavailable. Parent company Suncor says it's working with experts to investigate and resolve the issue. Suncor says at this point they found no evidence to suggest customer data has been compromised.
Wow.
How's this for a close encounter? Drone footage captured a curious humpback whale swimming alongside a kayaker at an Australian beach. He says he was close enough to touch the whale with his paddle. The two cruised through the crystal waters together with unassuming swimmers just nearby. Witnesses say the whale followed the kayaker about 2 kilometers before they went their separate ways. Fighting for their lives. Still ahead, the international outcry over Uganda's efforts to criminalize its LGBTQ2+ community. Uganda is facing growing international outrage and condemnation over its new so-called Anti-Homosexuality Act. Last month, the country approved the bill, which can include life in prison or even the death penalty for anyone engaged in homosexual acts. There are fears other African nations could soon follow suit. And as Jamie Dahl reports from Uganda, it's left that country's LGBTQ2+ community afraid for their lives.
The law is considered one of the harshest in the world, and those in the community here say they've had to build their walls even higher and are being pushed even further underground out of fear of severe punishment.
You know, is it being surveilled?
This is Kenya Jiro, not her real name. We are protecting her identity because she is bisexual. Even by talking to us on her phone in the dark of night, she is taking a risk.
Security person who just showed up and they just paused. And so right now I'm taking a walk away. Oh my God.
Are you okay?
Yes, I am. I got freaked out because anyway, that's the kind of thing that's happening right now because you don't know, you're not sure, you don't know who is going to be picked up or for what reason.
Same-sex relations in Uganda have always been a crime with a potential life sentence. The new law calls for the death penalty for LGBTQ people having sex with a minor or if the accused has an illness like HIV. Those found promoting homosexuality could face 20 years in jail.
That's the fear that we're living with, yeah? So it's, people are being attacked on the streets, yes, and being arrested, but then those who are not being attacked also have that anxiety.
Frank Mugisha has already been arrested in Uganda. The openly gay activist is in Canada and sat down with Prime Minister Trudeau. He's at the forefront of the fight against the law. He's returning home.
There are other anti-gay legislations coming up in other countries. So the spillover is real. So the urgency of responding and fighting back to stop these anti-gay legislations is urgent right now.
International organizations like the Stephen Lewis Foundation in Canada are working to help secure safe housing for those in the LGBTQ community in Uganda. This Ugandan government representative wants other countries to focus on bigger problems.
The Western countries are more interested in that bill than other predicators. We have very many problems.
In 2014, a similar law was overturned by the Constitutional Court here in Uganda, and similar petitions have already been filed once again. Regardless of the legislation, the Canadian government says it will be steadfast in its support for those most vulnerable here, but it stopped short of saying if any sanctions would be imposed. Jamie Dahl, Global News, Entebbe.
A finger-looking good scientific solution. Next, the lab-grown poultry that's changing meat production.
Please join me in a round of applause as we wish our crew well and they enter the habitat.
4 volunteers have embarked on a mock mission to Mars for the next 378 days. They'll be living inside a 3D printed 1,700 square foot simulated Mars habitat. It includes a kitchen, private crew quarters, and 2 bathrooms. NASA says the participants will take part in various missions, including simulated spacewalks and crop growing. That mission is designed to plan for successfully sending people to Mars for real. And some major scientific breakthroughs could soon be served at your dinner table. Last week, the U.S. Department of Agriculture gave a company the green light to sell lab-grown chicken meat. That means genuine meat made from the ground up using cells. No farms or eggs required. Mike Drolet brings us a taste of how it works.
There's nothing pretty about a chicken coop. It's a mass of beaks, feathers, and chicken attitude. And how it gets from here to here, most people would rather not know.
I feel like chicken tonight, like chicken tonight.
They just want their chicken tonight. But would they want this nugget, which was grown in a lab, and even chefs have a hard time distinguishing from the real thing?
Wow, great flavor. The texture's really nice.
So yeah, basic food biology isn't being written on barbecues, it's in labs, and it comes with a healthy side of questions.
I mean, like, is it genetically not chicken? What's the deal?
The deal is, yes, genetically, it's chicken, minus the beaks and feathers. They start with taking cells from a living animal. Then they're placed in a bath of nutrients inside a bioreactor where they multiply and grow. And then, in as little as 2 weeks, it comes out looking like minced meat. All that's left is to shape it so it looks like the real thing.
I like the real thing, the real McCoy, so I wouldn't be interested in.
It wasn't so long ago plant-based burgers were raising eyebrows. Now they're everywhere. Cultivated meat allows people to eat meat without slaughtering animals, removing cruelty concerns. Meat created in a lab still requires energy, but less so than traditional animal agriculture methods, which involve large chunks of land and significant water use. So there's the opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, a positive for the planet. Granted, there's a learning curve here. Because the idea of 3D printed meat still might be a hard sell for some.
Would I buy that? No.
No? Well, let's give the industry time to develop into whatever shape it wants, apparently. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Monday night. I'm Jeff Semple. We'll stick with the food and beverage theme for tonight's Your Canada. Davidson, Saskatchewan lays claim to the world's largest coffee pot. There you know. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.